give them another quick minute. Okay.
They keep changing the accent and the attendee ID on me.
Okay, we can hear you, Kurt.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I apologize. For some reason, it's not picking up the, let me see if the video works. Oops, I think we've got it. Sorry about that.
So I'll call the meeting to order for the, can we start? Yes. The Brownsville PUB Regulatory and Policy Committee meeting, June 26, 2024 at 5:18 at the BPUB Annex Building. So we'll start with the first item on the agenda with public comments.
No public comments.
No public comments, all righty. We'll go to item number 1 for presentation and discussion. Presentation of state legislative and regulatory activities. Paul Gonzalez.
By way of introduction to the committee, BPUB has representatives before the legislature and state agencies in two entities, Focused Advocacy and Modern Stewardship. Here today we have Buddy Garcia, and online we have Kurt Sedelitz and Lindley Hurd to make a brief presentation to you.
Thank you, Paul. Buddy?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, board members. Thank you for the opportunity on behalf of Focused Advocacy, Kurt Seidlitz, Lindley Hurd, and myself, Buddy Garcia. We are happy to be here before you today to discuss not only ongoing but upcoming legislative and regulatory activities that will affect Brownsville PUB. Kurt and Lindley and I visited before, and there's quite a bit of update we could give you, but in the interest of time, perhaps we should maybe focus on what's happening now and what's coming in the next legislative session, which begins in January. It's up to you all. I don't want to waste too much time, but we can go through our presentation, which is rather lengthy, and then I will tag team with Kurt and Lindley as topics dictate, if you don't mind. I'm starting with the overview here, which is what's just occurred in the primary elections. That's Democrats and Republicans separately, that they will face off in November. But the elections that passed a few months ago have now yielded, at least on the Republican side, a number of changes to the legislature. The House in particular is going to have a whole bunch of new members. And in this case, a number of Republicans who were targeted by other Republicans that didn't vote last session the way leadership wanted, to put it candidly. So you're going to have next session even more strident, I think, party affiliations, both in the House and the Senate. The Senate already was that way. And then right now, during the interim, after the elections, we have interim charges that the Lieutenant Governor and the House, the Speaker, give out to their respective chambers with topics that they want to study, and some of those involve electricity and water, as you might imagine, the grid. The agencies that affect you all are listed right there, the PUC, ERCOT, that's the grid, and the electricity changes that administratively and others that have been changed over the past couple of sessions. EPA and their state branch, TCEQ, the Water Development Board, and they had a big bill that passed last session to a water fund bill, $1 billion worth of water projects. And then the comptroller who regulates our budget. Kurt, I don't know, Lindley, do y'all want to chime in on that before I move on?
Yeah. Lindley, I think it would be good for the committee to hear just a little briefly on page 4 of the primary election results, just so we can give y'all a flavor of. It's going to be fruit basket turnover, at least in the House. The Senate is probably pretty set. But as far as new chairman and new committee members, we're probably going to be working with a lot of new folks, as well as some old hands that will come back. So, Lindley, maybe you just hit that real briefly on page 4.
Sure. Like Kurt said, big turnover this session. There were 16 House incumbents that didn't, I think, necessarily expect to lose their elections in the primary and the runoff. Some of those chairmanships are really important to our issues. Land and resource management, dealing with ETJ and annexation and various land zoning, various land use issues. That chairmanship is vacant, will be a new person next session. Also, what's important for Southmost Regional Water Authority is the Natural Resources Committee. That'll have a new chairman. So there will be lots of changes. And then we also have a bullet point on there. There are some, as y'all well know, your delegation, there are some races that will be heating up here in November. And there are no statewide, there's actually one statewide race on the ballot, Christy Craddock, the railroad commissioner. But other than that, governor, lieutenant governor, everybody will be there next session.
And that's a good point. Senator LaMantia does have an opponent in November, as does Representative Janie Lopez. Janie Lopez is a Republican. Senator LaMantia is a Democrat. I mentioned that because the Senate Lieutenant Governor has mentioned that legislation drafted by Republicans will have a chance at passing this next session. That was his primary goal, is to make a point of Republican authors, as well as his big gripe with the current speaker, that the current speaker appoints committee chairman of both parties. So that those themes were going to continue to resonate with leadership, I believe, in Austin. On slide 5 here, it just has the dates that are being, the April election, the November election, interim hearings. Just side note, the interim study process in years past has had a little more weight than it's had now. They didn't have as much time, I think, but it usually is a precursor when you follow the interim charges of possible legislation that's going to be considered next session, and a good chance to debate some of those issues or in the interim when they have those hearings. Let's see.
Buddy?
Yes.
Yeah, Buddy, we may just mention that they've already started those interim hearings. The Senate Business and Commerce has met once. House State Affairs has met once. And I think it's important to note, and what we're all trying to focus on in our discussions with the internal team at BPUB in the Senate, they're continuing to look and monitor at bills and new ideas that affect market design. Also, the Texas Energy Fund, which was the fund that the state is loaning money to developers of generation on a 20-year fixed-rate basis at 3% interest. There were over 150 notice of intents to try to apply for that fund, so a lot of interest there for dispatchable natural gas-fired generation. They're also talking about innovative power generation. Mainly, they're kind of focusing on batteries and nuclear, small modular nuclears. One of the big issues, and the big issues for, I think, for the Valley and for BPUB, is the transmission, how we're going to try to build this system out to meet all this growing demand. The Texas size growth, ERCOT has predicted a 40% over the next 6 years growth, which is phenomenal, unheard of. And then they're also looking at the impact of Bitcoin mining, and we'll be looking at the impact of artificial intelligence data centers, which operate on a 24/7 basis. They'll have 2 other hearings that are coming up. The House State Affairs, they also met pretty much a lot of the same type of issues that they're looking at. But the big debates, I think, that are going to be going forward from these 2 committees is how do we handle this increasing growing demand that economic development is putting on the grid, as well as new residential and commercials and manufacturing, especially in the Permian Basin and others. But it's got their attention on this huge demand for growth and how we're going to meet that with infrastructure needs. So that seems to be like where they're focusing, not so much on the market design as they have in the past.
Those issues, thank you for that. I agree, are going to continue to resonate here as well as industry wants to locate here, whether it be here, the port. How do you handle such large users of electricity like the Bitcoin or the data centers, and particularly in the hot of the summer or in the winter when the grid is tight? Is that electricity something they should generate on their own? Are those things that they should turn off when the grid is tight? Those are all issues that the legislature is grappling with, and to a certain degree water as well, that are going to continue to resonate. But it affects Wall Street. It affects anybody's ability to fund any of these projects, because power and water are going to be consistently a problem. The nuclear, smaller nuclear that the governor is pushing, it takes some lead time, but there's no emissions on that. The transmission problems Kurt alluded to are already here. You have all these wind turbines, and most days when it's tight, there's no transmission line to get that power out of here. If there was enough transmission to share it with the rest of the state, that it wouldn't be congested, and that's probably another issue of design. If we're going to, through the Energy Fund, bring in more dispatchable power, which is what's desired, instead of the renewables, how do you share that? How do you transmit it? Who's going to pay for it? And is there going to be enough generation to handle growth? Because the population's, 1,200 a day? Kurt, is that right? 1,200 people move here a day? Something of that nature?
Something of that nature. It's, the stat that caught everybody's attention was the 40% increase over the next 6 years. Now, whether that will occur or not, no one knows, but it's very difficult in a regulated wire system to build it hoping they will come. So I think the legislature is looking more as to what's the financial stability behind some of these large loads, what's their credit ratings, how long are they going to be here, are they going to pack up and move after 2 or 3 years? But the AI deal is, and the Permian and just the residential growth are the three that are really driving that deal. And Buddy, you and Lindley, you may just talk about from the water perspective, that same growth and the lack thereof of water and water systems, which is, of course, very much of importance down there. So, Buddy or Lindley, take that.
I could segue and hand over to Lindley, but I can tell you the state right now is very interested. Not only this is one of those bipartisan, Republican, Democrats, it doesn't matter where you're from. If you're in a community that has one water source, and you're in a drought, you're going to be thinking hard about how I'm going to continue to move forward. PUB is in a pretty good spot where you have a couple of options, where you have the Rio Grande and you have your desal plant, Brackish Desal, Southwest Regional Water Authority, and the ability to grow that. That's a good option to have. It's no panacea, but it's better than where some of the other communities are. The water fund, the Texas Water Fund, I believe has $1 billion that's been put aside for it, and there's an estimated $800 billion need. So, and that includes water systems that are public, that are investor-owned. I mean, there's any number of problems statewide that are not systematically addressed, particularly through the Water Development Board right now. But it is a focus of the state because as leadership wants the state to grow and be open to business, water, particularly drinking water, is, if not industrial water, are going to be important issues to address. Lindley, do you have something on this?
Sure, I fully agree with that. I think, the 1944 treaty issue is on everybody's mind in Austin. I think that, expanding the Southmost desal plant is something that lots of folks are talking about, and that's a great option. And as Buddy said, there's money available. It's maybe oversubscribed, but I think that's another opportunity for us to advocate for additional funding for water. Senator Perry, the chairman on the Senate Water Committee, has talked about for a long time more state level participation in these local projects. So I think that's something that we need to look toward next session, especially as there's a pretty decent sized surplus projected for the budget next session. So I think we have a lot of opportunity there.
And the idea of maybe getting some money dedicated, I know Brooke Pop, the chairwoman of the Water Development Board, and I have visited that she would like to envision, and I think other leaders, some type of a water fund that's more akin to a highway fund, where you apply and you get the water without it being so convoluted. The idea, though, of where they're talking now with Senator Perry and the Senate chairman of the Senate Water Committee, he at the last hearing he made a point throughout the hearing of talking about brackish desal. And there's pockets of brackish desal statewide, and not affecting surface water and not fresh groundwater, but the brackish desal, and perhaps that there's enough to begin tapping into another source statewide that you all know very well about, brackish desal. But again, the talks are there because there isn't enough water. There isn't the surface water is over allocated. Groundwater is being pumped dry, if you will, in Central Texas. There just aren't enough. Sorry. And I do think that the idea, though, of local communities who have been doing this already, the expertise, the BUB as a resource is going to be very welcome to that committee and to the legislature, because y'all have done things pretty well here.
Well, thank you, buddy. I just wanted to do a quick check, see if there was any questions. Again, we have a pretty tight schedule today, given that we have a couple of meetings. Yeah, any questions?
No, I really appreciate the update. Thank you.
I'm just glad you're here, buddy, working with us and working with administration, and as we prepare for the future very, very quickly, especially on the water issues.
Thank you, and I know this is a long presentation, and y'all please take a look at this. Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman, because I think this is a good time for the discussion amongst yourselves on what priorities you have for next session and how we can help. And if we need to follow up with this or another type of more informal or with the board members in more detail, we're available to you as well. I'll just zoom through these. There's a variety of rules. EPA is finalizing a new power plant rule. They're trying to effectively change some of the air quality, ambient air quality standards. Those are going to affect Texas in some way, especially industrial Texas. A variety of new opportunities. I think the legislature is going to look at incentives, change the Jobs Innovation Act from last session. Perhaps there's some changes coming. New commissioners. There's a new commissioner just appointed to PUC today. Old friend of ours, Courtney Haltman. Catarina Gonzalez is the newest TCEQ commissioner, and she was appointed in February, but these are all people that play into your realm. Kurt, Lindley, do y'all want to, we're trying to wrap up here, so if y'all have anything else.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of the issues that are going to be affecting the BPUB and that the board should be aware of are those old, municipal competition issues, continuation of the transmission rates, and also talking about general fund transfers between the MOU and the owner city. I think those are all going to be discussed as we go forward with the legislative session. So we just need to be prepared as we've been in the past, but we kind of know what the issues I think that are going to come up. So, but we would encourage, if y'all want to talk to us at any time, as Buddy said, we'll be happy to do so. But it's not very far till November.
What do you expect to be discussed in terms of the transfer, the city transfer?
So, well, I was going to say there is has been some animosity. For example, how the city of Austin transfers their within their system there, and Austin is different than Brownsville. You have a separate board. The city council there directly operates the Austin Energy and Water, and so the complaint, if you will, has been that they transferred funds over from one account to another to justify perhaps maybe that where tax dollars are not being utilized effectively, or where, but that issue of transferring your money, depending on where it's from, and some small communities is necessary. They need those funds from their utility to operate their cities, and that's being very heavily criticized by the leadership. That ability to move money around, whether that continues to move forward. Kurt, you want to chime in?
No, I was just going to say these issues aren't really new, and we've been working with Marilyn, of course, Mark and Paul and the team to make sure we have the proper responses that we need to diffuse any great changes in that area.
And I would say also because the perceptions will grow if we don't communicate. For example, there was a couple of sessions ago a push that MOU's rates were too high. And upon further review, they are not. They're very competitive. Our rates are some of the lowest. But if you allow those things to get, those messages to get out, those themes, without correcting and without sharing genuine facts, I mean, that's how those things start. Yep. So
So it sounds like there's definitely a lot of topics that are important, and part of what we will be doing, not just as a committee, but as a board, is working with the executive team and making sure we highlight the priorities, right? So we can also, within the broad area of different topics, that we can kind of focus on a couple of them that are important to us. And I think going back to Art's comment just about the frequency of reporting and information, the more frequent, the less, less we have to discuss it, in one session or whatever. So thank you again for being here. We really appreciate it, all the questions. We did review the presentation, and I think that's all the questions we have for now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I didn't realize how bald I was.
Yep, so we'll be moving on to item number 2, consideration and discussion to amend the BPUB identity theft prevention policy.
Members of the committee. My name is Eddie Campinana. I'm with the Customer Service Department. And so we've had a theft prevention policy in place since 2003. That was due to the FTC's 2003's FAST Act, or red flags. And so we updated it in 2013 to reformat to comply with our new formatting standards. And so we're back here since we've had some changes here, and so this is the policy as it sits today. So the changes that we're proposing are as follows, and again, they're due to the reorganizational structure, and so this is what we're proposing changes. We're updating the policy number for compliance with records management standards. We've combined a few of the sections there with BP employees' roles and responsibilities. And we've added a section for detection, prevention, and mitigation. We removed examples of customers identifying information, and updated program manager to reflect the reorg, which is the Director of Customer Service and Support Services. So that's what we're proposing. So the next steps would be presenting these changes again to the full board on July 8th. Do we have any questions on proposed changes or the policy itself?
Nope, doesn't sound like we have any questions. It seems pretty straightforward. And at least for this one, I would probably put it in the consent items section for the bigger board meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Moving on to item number 3, presentation and discussion of revisions to the BPUB personnel policies and procedures, policy number 24, travel policy.
Chairman and board members, my name is Sergio Delgadillo, Compensation and Benefits Manager. I'll be presenting this item. So travel policy was last reviewed in 2003. In reviewing this policy, we acknowledged that we had some redundancy with additional BPUB travel-related policies. We worked in coordination internally to ensure that our policies were aligned to each other, that they're not redundant, and most importantly, that they set and provide clear direction to our employees. Our current policy establishes guidelines for travel and reimbursement. As I present the proposed policy changes, you will see how we are changing this policy, which resides in our personal policies and procedures, to provide direction on employee travel and employees' travel time. The reimbursement section will be covered under our travel expense policy, which will be presented as the next item. Like we do with all our policies, we are working closely with the legal counsel to ensure that these policies are aligned and compliant with federal and state laws, local laws as well, sorry. In the review of all of our policies, we're making sure that three things happen: that the format, wording, and feel of the document is consistent, that we are in compliance, of course, with federal, state, and local regulations, and we ensure that language is clear and easy to understand. At the end, our policies that all our employees must follow. Some of the sections were updated and reorganized, again, with the intent of making it clear and easy to understand. We had 9 sections. We retitled 3 of those sections. 6 sections were removed. They were all procedural language sections. They are now included in the Travel Procedures Handbook. And we also added a new section has to do with non-exempt employee travel, which basically outlines the pay for the employees that are non-exempt when they're traveling. Say it's a travel for the same cities, travel and returning the same day, or travel to another city and returning the following days. And that would be the changes to this policy.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, any questions?
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Just hopefully a quick question. The travel away from home, so it's only, it only counts as work if it's during normal work hours?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm sorry, you were finished with your question, yes, right?
Yes.
Yes, I didn't want to jump the gun. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we did look into all of our regulations, and this is regulated by DOL. And yes, when you are traveling and you're a non-exempt employee, travel away from home would be when you're traveling during your regular work time, then it's work time. When it's not, then you're not on the clock.
I see. So these are consistent with bigger policy than us anyway. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
they're complying with Department of Labor.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's pretty standard how we operate as well. Like at least in my companies, you get paid for the day. You don't get paid if it takes you 15 hours to get there. You get paid your normal 8 hours a day, as opposed to the 15 hours. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, that's for exempt personnel, right? For exempt personnel, classified as.
This will be non-exempt personnel.
Non-exempt, which I'm sorry, is the
Yes,
on the
non-exempt personnel.
professional side.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the update. Are you going to do the next one as well?
No, that
Okay.
will be finance.
Yeah, thank you. This one, I think, also is pretty straightforward. We can include it in the consent, see if there's any particular interest or any feedback for the bigger meeting. So we'll move on to item number 4, presentation and discussion of revisions of the BPUB Board Travel Policy. Yeah.
Good evening,
Sure.
Chair, committee members. My name is Jorge Santillan, Treasury and Accounting Manager. The current policy was approved on June 13, 2016, and revised on March 20, 2018. The policy establishes structure of the financial processes associated with the BPUB business travel expenses. Some of the proposed changes, we are changing the name of the policy from travel policy to travel expense policy. And also we're updating the department name to Accounting and Treasury Department. The changes to this policy include we are removing the violation of policy, which is now summarized in the Personnel Policies and Procedures Manual, policy number 24, under the non-compliance section. And we're adding the travel expense report section. And those are the changes. Any questions?
No? No questions? Also pretty straightforward, and we'll include this in the consent.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just for clarity, all of these items, so just for the record, is item number 2, which is the theft prevention policy, policy number 24, and the travel policy, all of them will be in your board packets under consent. The next one, item number 5, is the one that I would recommend for it be an individual consideration, so we'll move to that discussion.
Yep, so moving on to item number 5, discussion and possible recommendation on review a resolution on the rules governing the board of directors.
Good afternoon, Paul Gonzalez, General Counsel and Chief Legal Officer. Your board packet contains a revision, a proposed revision. It's a draft of changes to the rules that the board can adopt and modify, and it has done so a couple of times, I think annually since 2022, to govern its own course of conduct. And the two specific proposals that were raised for this time happen to start at page 3 in Roman number 8. The board order of business is the first. And basically, there was a little bit of confusion regarding the placement of the public comment section in the meetings. And it has to go by law before there's any sort of action taken. So these changes clarify that, yes, that's indeed where it's going to go. So the revisions are not really substantive because we try to comply with that state law requirement, but it does clarify for posterity that we're going to do the public comments up front. And typically, the reports where no action is taken, really, other than you might ask for something to be placed on a future agenda item. That's why the reports can come first. So I think there was an interest at some point to try to, let people come out from work so that they can come and give public comment, and there's still an effort to preserve that. So it's placed before the consent agenda items. Any questions on that first set of changes on pages 3 and 4?
No, I think it aligns to basically what we've been doing and the intent, which was to allow the public to have enough time to come during the meeting. So I think that's pretty straightforward. I know it has to be reviewed through legal and everything just to make sure, but I don't have any questions. Art?
I'm good.
Daisy?
The second proposed change, sir, is to Rule 14, Roman number 14, standing committees. It starts on page 6 and continues to page 7. There was mention of interest in, since these committees, take time. Today we had three committee meetings, which is great. That there be some potential flexibility in appointing a recent and former board member to participate on an advisory-only committee. So Part B, the changes are are a draft, an attempt to recognize how that might work. Part B specifies that the chair of the board can name a former board member as eligible to be appointed to a standing committee that is advisory only in nature, provided that the person, one of two conditions here, served on the board for at least one term, which term must have ended within 4 years of the nomination, and 2, is qualified to serve on the board as provided by Charter Article 6, Section 1D. So it's the same qualification that a board member would need to meet. Only one member of the committee may be a former board member. If confirmed by the board and subject to acceptance of a non-disclosure agreement and confirmation of no conflicts of interest, the person may serve on the committee for a term not to exceed 2 years. The chairman retains discretion to remove a former board member for any reason. That's the sum and substance of that revision.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting one. That's probably going to be where there'll be more discussion on. Do you have any questions for now?
No, I just think this brings perhaps another dimension to folks serving on committees. We have our standing committees, and this gives an opportunity to add somebody else who's not a board member. I do think we're going to require a little more discussion with the entire board as we move forward with this idea or this proposal.
And just a quick question on the removal of that person from, let's say they are added. Do we have the process on how they would be removed?
It's the way it's set out, it's at the chair, whoever's the chairperson for the board would have that discretion
For the committee or for the board?
for that former board member to be on that committee.
Or for any board member, current board member.
Right,
Or
you know,
former
I.
board member. So I think it would be useful to clarify that the chairman ultimately has the discretion.
Correct. That's what paragraph A addresses.
We just says that the chair can appoint, that the board chair can appoint up to 3 people, right?
Now, if you look at page 7, where the red line,
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know if it's red. Letter B talks about the appointment, then it talks about the potential removal. The chairman retains discretion to remove a former board member. The way I think that may happen in the future is simply by notifying them that they will no longer be serving on the board effective a certain date. But Paul, you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't. The standing committees' charters have their own, some of their own provisions. This was a proposal to overlay the capability of having a former board member onto this process. Board members who are, currently sitting, you have discretion as to how you conduct yourselves. If you wanted a different change in these rules of governance, we could draft that, but I'm not seeing that there's any other application that we drafted other than to clearly specify who can be a former board member who gets appointed, how long they serve, and it's got some limitations to it. They need to be subject to confidentiality, just like as board members, you have a fiduciary duty to the system, right? And then how they can be removed. They're serving at the discretion of the person who is the chair of the board. And so that specific provision was crafted just for that circumstance. So if there are any other changes to any other provision of the rules of governance, the board can take that up and we'll draft something around that.
Okay. Yeah, so there may be more feedback from the other board members. In my case, I would like to see something a little bit more comprehensive on the removal, right? I just, obviously, there's many people recently as well that I would love to have back and, pick their brain and have them help us, advise us. At the same time, I also can think of potential conflicts, right? If something's getting more political, right, the chair assigns somebody, to have an ear or, to have details, etc. So I would be interested in just making sure that there's a way for us to remove, not just the chair, but as a board, that we can remove an advisor.
Well, there's that role of the board in confirming, so there could be a role in the board as for removal as well.
Yeah.
That's the discretion of the board in governing yourselves.
Yep.
Right.
Other than that, it's pretty clear, and I think it, as Art mentioned, is going to give us another dimension there, and really just more support. More support. Thinking of it more positively, right? Is more support and advise to help us help you, operate.
And And Marilyn, this is an item I don't think we're not going to be entertaining on the next meeting.
We,
I was
we,
hoping
we do have it.
we have it. Because we're going to have a limited board
Okay,
participation, I think we should hold off until August.
will do. We'll move it to the August meeting, and it also gives us time, if you all want to have another policy meeting, to council to go ahead and draft additional language and see if that's something that the committee would like to recommend it to the full board, how the removal process to be a little bit more specified there.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, and I wouldn't really, I think August is fine. I don't think there's any rush. If we have another policy meeting, I think we can help maybe do that. But I would feel comfortable for you to make a proposal and just have the bigger board have the discussion, and, you know, anybody can, you know, bring any ideas that they may have, you know. I think it's pretty standard.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so we do have one item for a closed meeting. So I'll continue with the agenda here, and I'll read the closed meeting notice. At this time, this item on the agenda is designated for closed meeting will be considered if there is an approved motion to go into closed meeting. The listeners will be placed on hold until the board returns to open meeting.
I make a motion to go into closed session?
Second motion.
Well, I think I still have to read the item.
Okay.
Consider an action and approval of the BPUB Energy Risk Management Policy Updates, Section 551.086. I think there was a motion and a second, so motion passes, and we'll convene into closed meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
We ready to continue, or? Yeah.
Okay, sir.
3 minutes, 2 minutes? Okay. Well, we have closed the closed meeting, and I think there's one more item here that we need to look at, which is reconvene open meeting. So discussion and possible recommendation on closed meeting items. The recommendation was to,
What was
Take to the
language
full
on that?
board?
yeah, to share with the board for the July meeting, July 8th meeting. Yeah, that's it. Other than that, this meeting is adjourned.
John?
was the recommendation. To take to the board, right? Okay.
Do we have in between recess?